Why is it that conflict is so tough on anxious partners in relationships? And why else is it that sometimes after weeks of a conflict being dormant and not being brought up, sometimes an anxious person will bring it back up all over again, leaving their partner feeling confused or lost about, didn't we resolve this? And why is it being brought to the surface yet again? Well, the answer to this question is that there are usually three major things every anxious partner in a relationship needs in order to feel like a conflict is truly resolved, not just have the emotions settled and calmed down, but actually to feel like there's true resolution. And the vast majority of people get this wrong completely when it comes to actually resolving conflict, especially with an anxious partner. And if you are the anxious person in a relationship listening to this right now, take notes or write some of these things down or keep a mental checklist so that in a future conflict, you can actually request these things, which will allow you to feel like you can really be at ease after a conflict takes place. Okay, so here's the first thing that most people get wrong. And it's that in order to have a conflict resolved, each person has to have their emotional side of it validated. What do I mean by the emotional side of it validated? Well, you can validate somebody's emotions without validating their behavior. So let's just say, for example, that Bob comes and Bob raises his voice at me. And let's pretend Bob is my coworker. It's never okay for Bob, my coworker, to raise his voice at me, but it can be really calming to actually say to Bob, hey, Bob, I can see that you're really frustrated right now, but it's completely unacceptable to raise your voice. Come talk to me when you're ready to have a healthy conversation. And if I communicate that way to Bob, it's actually the best way that you're ever going to get a boundary heard is when you clearly use strong language like that's unacceptable, this is non-negotiable, but you do so in a regulated tone. So going back to that point, every anxious partner in a relationship really needs to have their feelings acknowledged, even if for some reason they are the ones doing something wrong in a relationship dynamic, so that they can be more present, calm down, and actually have a healthy conversation around the conflict that can then lead to the resolution part that we're going to get into in the next 2 points. And what I mean by validating somebody's emotions is saying something like, hey, I can see you're stressed right now. I can see this is uncomfortable for you, or I can see that this makes you feel anxious or sad, and I get it. It's being able to actually let somebody know that you can see their emotional point of view and how they're feeling. And while that may seem like a small thing, when somebody's in a conflict, unfortunately, we often feel so defensive against the person we're in a conflict with, unless we've actually done some work on how to do conflict in a healthy way. And what this often leads to is feeling like somebody's your enemy in the moment of a heated conversation. And when you are able to actually say to somebody, hey, I can see that this is stressful for you. I can see this is frustrating. And we can let somebody know we see them. It actually allows both parties in the relationship to drop their walls because they feel connected again. And ideally, in every conflict, this is actually a two-way conversation where we're able to recognize what each other is feeling and let the person know I can see you, which is sort of like saying I can empathize with what you're going through right now. And I know that this conflict is hard on both of us. So that's really point number one of three. Point number two, okay? And I want to say point number one and two go together. But when somebody brings up a past conflict after weeks of it not being brought up in conversation, it's actually because it was stored in the subconscious mind with a lack of resolution. In other words, if somebody says to you, yeah, but 4 weeks ago, you also did ABC, and you're like, wait, but we talked about that 4 weeks ago. And maybe it's like 4 weeks ago, you were rude to my parents or to your in-laws or whatever it is. If we're triggered about that 4 weeks ago, what that means is that 4 weeks ago, there was never proper resolution. And resolution really consists of point one and two. And we're going to add this point three at the end. But point one is like seeing that your partner was affected by the situation, right? So with an anxious partner, if they're bringing something back up, it's because they probably didn't have their emotions validated properly from 4 weeks ago. And so because the subconscious mind stores everything and it stores it with its associations attached, in other words, its emotions attached from the conflict, like if you still felt a lack of resolution, you're going to bring this conflict back up weeks later because it was stored with a lack of resolution, never felt resolved in the first place. So that emotional validation is absolutely massive. It's such an important part of actual resolution. But point number two, this is another arguably even bigger part of emotional resolution and conflict resolution, is that you have to be able to say why it happened and what you're going to do to prevent it from happening again. And we call this the needs resolution part. So what you would say here is, hey, I understand that when I was short with your in-laws last week, that was really uncomfortable for you. I can completely understand where you're coming from. And I see that that's frustrating. And, let me share some insight with you about what led up to it so we can come up with a strategy so it doesn't happen again. And maybe you recognize that you had poor boundaries all day and you were feeling overwhelmed and the in-laws showed up unannounced. And so you were already overwhelmed and then that happened. And so you need to work on your boundaries and you need to tell your in-laws they need to send a text in advance before showing up so that this doesn't have to come to that kind of cycle. So it would be something like that, right? We're actually looking at what the conflict is. We're looking at the root cause of what caused the issue and then what we can do to prevent this from happening again. So let's actually unpack a common conflict that somebody with an anxious partner might go through. Let's say, for example, that you're the anxious partner and your loved one didn't call you back when you were expecting a call from them and they didn't acknowledge it and you were just left there waiting. So in this particular case, you would start by validating that person's feelings. So if you were the partner of an anxious partner, you would say, hey, I can see how that would be frustrating and hurtful to you. I get where you're coming from. And number two, we would go into the needs resolution. And for me, what was going on is I got caught late at work. I felt overwhelmed and exhausted. And when I got home, I just put my phone away and I fell asleep early. And what I realized that I need to do is send you a text before I leave work if I'm running late to let you know, hey, I worked late. I'm going to be really tired tonight. Let's catch up properly tomorrow. And so what we're doing is we're like recognizing, hey, here's why the conflict, the problem unfolded the way that it did. And so that we can prevent this from happening in the future, here's a strategy that we can now use. Now, doing these things, the emotional validation, the recognition of root cause, the strategy to prevent this from happening in the future, we're getting now into a space where we can actually resolve conflicts. We still have one added thing to dive into. But before we do, if you're somebody who feels like you really struggle with conflict and feeling like it's not resolved, it may also be that you don't really know what your needs are in relationships. Everybody has major needs. And in particular, we have needs that help us feel like conflict can actually get resolved and help us feel most connected. And if you want to check out a course fully for free, as well as actually keep that course for life, we're running a once in a year promotion just for January, where you can check out the needs course fully for free. It's one of my favorite courses at PDS. And if you sign up for the membership trial, and literally if you cancel, you'll never get charged anything, but I'll put a link below. You get to keep that course for free no matter what. So I'll put that link. That needs course will really help you know your needs, improve your self-soothing because you'll actually know how to meet your own needs. It's a huge step to becoming securely attached, to actually be able to self-soothe, to know your needs. And most importantly, or one of the most important things is it will help you know what you need around conflict and what your partner needs around conflict, because needs are such an important part of, like we're talking about on point number 2 here, of resolution. So that is a course you get to keep for life. If you're interested, you can use the link down below. Now, point number 3, we need to be able to check in with each other and actually say, hey, do you feel resolved? Is there anything else missing here in order to feel resolved? And then we kind of call point number 3 this rebonding phase. It's like how we connect best after a conflict. And in this particular case, an anxious partner feels the most connected and reassured after a conflict if their partner says something validating to them. Hey, I'm glad we talked this out. I really love you. I care about this relationship. Or, hey, I'm glad that we talked this out. I really care about you and I'm excited for our future together. Something where there's validation at the end is huge for an anxious partner to actually feel like, okay, emotions were validated. There's a strategy for preventing this in the future. And now I know you still care about me, and that creates full resolution. And in case you missed it, you can now reserve your spot and get more than a 50% early bird discount for our live relationship coach certification program. This 12-week program gives you the opportunity to build a new career, create your own thriving coaching practice, help your community, and secure your financial future full of abundance with a growing waitlist of clients. And the best part is that you get to spend a whole bunch of time with me as I teach you exclusive subconscious reprogramming tools and help you learn how to change somebody's attachment style from insecurely attached to securely attached so that you can truly help create transformation in people's lives and have a wait list of people waiting to work with you. We also have an entire business week about how to build funnels, systems, and to really build a thriving and busy practice. You can sign up using the link down below the video, and I can't wait to see you there. So hopefully this is helpful for you if you have an anxious partner or you are an anxious person in relationships and really want that support for how to communicate to your partner what you truly need to feel resolved, and also This is massive immunity in relationships for preventing somebody from bringing things back up because we're actually resolving it properly the first time. So I hope this was helpful for you. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching. Please share this with somebody if you think it can help them. Please like this video if you enjoyed it or subscribe to this channel. I'd love to have you here in our community, and I'll see you in future videos.